You need to cancel dinner. A simple, can't make it, would do. But instead, you're writing a novel. You list every commitment from the past week, apologize 4 different ways, invent a semi-believable excuse about your cat's vet appointment, and then apologize again for apologizing. You hit send, and instead of relief, you feel this creeping sense of dread. Did they buy it? Are they upset? Do they think you're lying? You check your phone obsessively for the next hour, waiting for their response, analyzing the punctuation when it finally arrives. This exhaustion, this constant performance of being acceptable, is eating you alive from the inside out. Let me know in the comments which city you're watching from, and tell me honestly, have you experienced these things? Here's what most people won't tell you. Depending on how your brain processes the world, you might be doing this for completely different reasons, and understanding which one applies to you changes everything. For some of you, especially those with ADHD or autistic neurology, you over-explain because of what neuroscientists call bottom-up processing. Details aren't excess information to you. They're the building blocks of accurate communication. You're not apologizing when you explain, you're trying to paint the complete picture because incomplete information feels like lying. This is info dumping. And when it comes from genuine enthusiasm or a love of precision, it's actually a beautiful aspect of how you connect with the world. Don't let anyone shame you out of that. But for many others, this compulsion to over-explain comes from somewhere much darker. It comes from a wound that never fully healed. In trauma psychology, we call this fawning. You've heard of fight, flight, and freeze, but fawn is the 4th trauma response that doesn't get enough attention. It's a survival mechanism developed by people who learned early in life that safety meant being agreeable, accommodating, and perpetually apologetic. When you over-explain from this place, your subconscious isn't trying to be thorough, it's begging for permission to exist. Every excessive detail is a plea, please don't abandon me. Please see that I have legitimate reasons. Please still think I'm a good person, even though I'm setting this tiny boundary. Today, we're going to stop begging for permission to take up space. We're going to examine the actual biological cost of this behavior, the social dynamics it creates. And I'm going to give you a clinical framework for reclaiming both your status and your energy. This isn't about becoming cold or uncaring. It's about understanding that you've been carrying other people's emotional weight while your own structure collapses under the pressure. To understand why saying a simple no feels like you're about to be exiled from the tribe, we need to look at your neurological hardware. Imagine your brain has this ancient, well-meaning bodyguard living inside it. This bodyguard loves you desperately, but it's operating with extremely outdated software. It evolved in an environment where social rejection literally meant death, where being cast out of the group meant you'd be eaten by predators or starve alone. So when you're about to send a text declining an invitation, this bodyguard starts screaming danger signals. It genuinely believes that this person might reject you, and rejection in its ancient operating system equals immediate death. Your heart races, your palms sweat, and that overwhelming urge to explain yourself floods your system. That's your bodyguard panicking, trying to make you safe by making you acceptable. But here's the crucial part that most people miss. Every single time you give in to that urge, every time you send that 3-paragraph justification, you're actively weakening a specific part of your brain called the anterior midcingulate cortex. Think of this region as your tenacity muscle, your willpower generator, the part of your brain that grows stronger specifically when you do things you don't want to do. Research shows that this area literally increases in volume when you sit through discomfort, when you resist the easy path, when you hold a boundary even though every fiber of your being wants to collapse it. When you over-explain, when you give in to the anxiety and cushion your no with excessive justification, you're putting the weight down. You're teaching your brain that you're not strong enough to handle someone else's potential disappointment. You're training yourself to be weak. Every single time you send that long, apologetic text, you're running a program in your neural circuitry that says, I am not capable of surviving someone's negative reaction to my boundaries. And your brain, being the learning machine it is, starts to believe this. The anterior midcingulate cortex atrophies from lack of use, and the next boundary becomes even harder to hold. You're caught in a vicious cycle where each instance of over-explanation makes the next one more likely, more desperate, more exhausting. Now let's talk about the social reality that nobody wants to acknowledge because it feels harsh, but ignoring it doesn't make it less true. The more you explain, the less you are respected. This isn't opinion. It's documented in social psychology research on status signaling. In any social dynamic, there's an invisible hierarchy, and one of the clearest markers of where someone sits in that hierarchy is how much they feel compelled to justify their decisions. High-status individuals state what they're doing. They don't defend it. A CEO says, "I won't be available Friday," and that's the end of the sentence. They don't list their schedule, apologize for having commitments, or seek approval for how they spend their time. When you offer unprompted explanations, when you justify decisions that nobody even questioned, you're broadcasting a signal. That signal says, my time is not my own, my decisions require external validation. I am submitting to your judgment of my choices. You're telegraphing to everyone around you that you don't believe you have the right to make decisions about your own life without their approval. And humans, whether consciously or unconsciously, pick up on these signals. They adjust their treatment of you accordingly. There's also the scarcity principle at play here. Human beings assign value based on scarcity. If you're always available, always explaining, always accommodating, you become abundant. And abundant things are not valued. When you're constantly breaking your own boundaries to please others, when your energy is always accessible to anyone who asks, you're teaching people that your time is cheap. You're training them to treat you like a resource they can drain without consequence. This isn't because people are malicious. It's because you're actively instructing them on how to value you, and the instruction you're giving is, I am not scarce, I am not valuable. You can take as much as you want. Self-respect is simply the reputation you have with yourself. Every single time you promise yourself you'll rest and then say yes to someone else's request, every time you set an internal boundary and then immediately violate it when tested, you're damaging that reputation. Your brain is watching, it's taking notes. And it's concluding we don't keep our promises. We don't matter, other people's comfort is more important than our survival. This becomes exponentially more dangerous when you're dealing with high conflict personalities or people who score high on what psychologists call the dark tetrad: narcissism, Machiavellianism, psychopathy, and sadism. If you're a highly empathetic person, what I call a super sensor, you operate under a fundamental assumption that most people share your wiring. You believe that if you just explain your pain clearly enough, if you articulate your limitations with enough detail, the other person will understand and adjust their behavior accordingly. This is a catastrophic misunderstanding of how these personalities function. People with dark tetrad traits have what researchers call empathy dissociation. They possess high cognitive empathy, meaning they're excellent at understanding what you're thinking and feeling. They can read your emotions, predict your reactions, and comprehend your explanations perfectly. But they have an off switch for effective empathy. They don't feel your pain, they understand it intellectually, and they use that understanding as a weapon. When you explain to them why you can't do something, you're not generating compassion, you're providing them with data. You're showing them exactly which buttons to push, which fears to exploit, which vulnerabilities to target. This brings us to the most important acronym you'll ever learn for protecting yourself, J.A.D.E. It stands for justify, argue, defend, explain. When you say no and then immediately start to justify your decision or explain your reasoning, you're not providing clarity. You're handing over ammunition. Let's say you tell someone you can't come to their event because you need to clean your house. You think you're being honest and thorough. But what you've actually done is give them a hook. They'll immediately say, just clean it tomorrow, or it doesn't need to be perfect, or you can leave early and still have time. Because you offered a reason, you opened a negotiation. You invited them to argue with your logic, which forces you to defend your position, which leads to more explaining, which gives them more ammunition. It's an endless loop that drains you completely while they remain perfectly energized by the conflict. The solution is something I call the power of the period. Instead of a 3-paragraph text message, you send a clean, complete sentence. I can't make it on Friday, period. Full stop. No justification, no apology, no cushioning. No, thank you, period. I'm not discussing that, period. The sentence is complete. It requires nothing additional. When you first try this, you're going to feel like you're being rude. You're going to feel like you're shouting at someone. The silence after you hit send will feel enormous, oppressive, wrong. Every instinct you have will scream at you to send a follow-up message softening it, explaining it, apologizing for it. Your ancient bodyguard will absolutely lose its mind. Do not give in. That silence, that discomfort, that feeling like you're doing something wrong, That is exactly where your self-respect grows. That uncomfortable pause is a repetition at the gym for your anterior midcingulate cortex. You're doing the hard thing. You're sitting in the tension instead of escaping it. You're teaching your brain that you are strong enough to handle someone else's reaction to your boundary. If you're in a situation where a stark no feels inappropriate, perhaps with a boss or a co-parent or someone you need to maintain a working relationship with, you can use what's called the BIFF protocol: brief, informative, friendly, firm. You keep it short. You provide only the necessary logistical information. You maintain a professional tone, and you close the door on further drama. A BF response looks like this: "Hi, I'm not discussing this over text. If you have a logistical question about the schedule, let me know. Thanks." It's cordial without being warm. It's informative without providing hooks. It forces the conversation to either become productive or to end. I understand that for highly sensitive people, for orchids, for supersensors, this approach feels like trying to speak a foreign language while wearing mittens. It doesn't come naturally. You're not built for bluntness. You're built for nuance, for reading subtle emotional currents, for being what I call the vanguard of awareness. But you cannot maintain that awareness if you're constantly being drained by everyone else's demands. You cannot be the early warning system for your community if you're running on empty. I want to propose a 6-month challenge for your boundary system. We're not trying to turn you into someone who doesn't care about people. We're trying to make you the gardener of your own greenhouse instead of fertilizer for everyone else's garden. Start with what I call the 15% push. You don't need to suddenly say no to your boss's biggest request tomorrow. Start small, tiny. The next time someone asks for a minor favor that you genuinely don't have capacity for, use the pause protocol. Say, "Let me check my capacity and get back to you." This single sentence buys you time. It allows your prefrontal cortex, your logical planning brain, to catch up with your limbic system, your emotional reactive brain. In that pause, that breathing room you've created, look at your oxygen mask. Are you helping someone else while you're suffocating? If the answer is yes, then the period, that full stop, that complete sentence without justification, that is your oxygen. That is the breath you need to survive. Protecting your energy isn't a rejection of other people. It's an act of self-preservation that ultimately allows you to be more present for the relationships that actually matter. You cannot pour from an empty cup, and you've been running on empty for so long that you've forgotten what full feels like. When you stop over-explaining, when you stop cushioning every boundary with apology and justification, you become a filter. You naturally repel people who are only interested in using your empathy as a resource, and you attract people who respect your autonomy. The relationships that survive your boundaries are the relationships that were real in the first place. Your existence is valid without explanation. Your no is complete without justification. You do not need to defend your right to take up space on this earth. Stop being the performer in your own life. Start being the observer. Master the power of the period, and watch how the world begins to reflect the respect you finally have for yourself.